they have much more foreign than if they don't trade. And it's evident in entrepreneurs only foreign, for example, in the second employees only foreign, that they tend to hire only foreign. Maybe, I don't know, we can analyze, for example, if they tend to hire exactly people from the same country of origin, but it's a potential analysis. Okay. In this slide, I want to focus on the last part. Of course, we are talking of subpopulation, target population, but they can be relevant for some studies. So the last example is on the possibility to analyze also, in addition to the same country of origin of the entrepreneur, of at least one employee, also the same export country, if they export exactly in the same country where they come from. And one result is to look at the share of export value for our economy in relation to the nationality and the country of origin of people. Let's say, for example, that inside the European Union, France, Germany, United Kingdom, people engaged in this trading are much more performing than others, or there are many people on this. We have also Switzerland among the not EU countries that show a high level of export value. And this is about the ownership of the enterprises, in particular if these exporter companies belong to enterprise multinational groups or are independent. It's quite evident that if they belong to multinational groups, of course they have a higher performance rate. Finally, the last analysis was in profiling the entrepreneurs of agro enterprises. We found, according to a multivariate analysis, a cluster analysis, 4 clusters. We just described the cluster according to the socio-demographic characteristics, the education that people have inside this cluster. As the first one, for example, is made of adult having a diploma of secondary education, and this the cluster where foreigners are much present. The second profile is composed by males, older, with an above average education. The third is of women with higher education. Women, they present always higher education. And the fourth profile concerns female entrepreneurs younger. This is an example of stratification, a possibility to use this classification for analysis of productivity and other things. So what I wanted just to have an idea of the potentiality and the possibility to use this taxonomy also for the further analysis. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Katerina. We have a question right at the back. I can't see the country, so please go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the foreign-owned concept. Does it mean the immediate parent of the company or the ultimate parent of the company? I mean the ultimate parent, the country of the ultimate parent of the company or the immediate parent of the company. And the second one is that, do you also use the SBR as the data source for the foreign affiliate trade statistic? Thank you.
I understand the first one and the last part of the second I didn't hear. Okay. I try to answer, otherwise. When I say that the foreign is linked to the ownership of the enterprise. So because in Italy we have a lot of sole proprietorship enterprises and also partnership and companies, and they are organized independently or in group. So when we speak about independent and sole proprietorship in the enterprises, let's say that the origin is the country of birth of the individual that owner the enterprise. We have the information because we have the fiscal code, we have a lot of administrative sources giving us where the person come from. Okay, say if Italian or not. It's easy for us to understand this. So in the case of a group or multinational group, the ownership is given from shareholders, and depends on the the ownership and on the algorithm that choose the entrepreneur inside this complex organization. So if the ultimate controlling is a person, the country of origin of the person is tell us if it's Italian or not. The second question was about the business register and, sorry, can you repeat?
And the FATS, foreign affiliate trade statistics, to also use.
Maybe could you talk about that at coffee would be good, I think, because I'm a bit running behind, so I can take, has anybody else got one more burning question? A quick burning question, otherwise I'm afraid we're going to have to move on. Sorry, Katerina, thank you very much for that, thank you.
And then, yes, it's okay.
This is wasting a lot of time between my time is very tight, and it takes 5 minutes between each presenter. We can go back there. Thank you very much.
Netherlands. Okay.
While they're getting the slides up, so I didn't announce this is Irina from the Netherlands, who's going to talk about the data lake approach in the Netherlands and how that can strengthen the role of the SPR.
With the page down.
I think we're nearly there.
No, then you need this one.
Sorry.
Oh, there.
It's okay?
Yes, thank you. Okay, it will be about the data lake and the statistical business register. But before I start to talk about data lakes and data strategies, I would like to illustrate how much our today's world changed. Here's the Statistics Netherlands mission, which is actually quite straightforward, to provide reliable and coherent statistical information that adapts the need of society. But this is really a little bit deceptive because it does not reveal the complexity that actually lies behind it. In today's world, we have more and complex supply of data, and it's really a challenge to stay upright in this actual data tsunami. And not only the supply of data becomes more complex, but we also see that the demand for information becomes more and more complex. Statistics Netherlands started urban data centers, collaborations with municipalities to share data and to provide data on a local level and for local policy making. This is quite complex to establish. And what goes for the local level actually also goes for the international level. I think we are all familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, and a lot of NSIs are involved to supply the information on the SDGs and the goals of the SDGs. We use an awful lot of data. For Statistics Netherlands, on 17 teams, we have like 75 owners of these data that we approach to use over 200 registries to use in our daily statistics production. Also, the role of Statistics Netherlands changes a little. We're not only a statistical data producer anymore, but actually we are like a collaborative data hub. When we look at the data needs nowadays, on the left-hand side we know what we are all familiar with, like the regular statistics production of statistical data. We do statistics research on microdata, and we deliver custom-fit figures. On the right-hand side, we see new demands and needs evolving. Actually, people would like to call Statistics Netherlands, like with a Siri application, just ask a question, a statistical information is provided. We call that the information dialogue, an automated system to provide information to statistical users. The data centers, I already said, there is more need for collaboration between NSIs and municipalities and other data users who want to make more use of their own data and need the help of statistical offices. And the third one is also pretty new. Sometimes parties want to work together and they don't really need data from Statistics Netherlands, but they need the support to support the collaboration between those parties. This all in all led to the definition of a data vision at Statistics Netherlands. Stimulate more data coupling, become a data-centric organization, support the FAIR principles, develop users so that they are more mature to use their own data, support to third parties, the importance of the use of metadata. I think we heard that in the first presentation of Canada as well, and starting an information dialogue. In this presentation, I will focus on the more data coupling and the data-centric organization. So what about the data lake and architecture? This data strategy requires actually a new approach on how we look at data. And data should be more looked at as the central asset in our office, which means a data-centric organization. And what we mean by this is that all the processes and all the activities are now organized around the data. So there's more focus on the data, there is the possibility of more reuse of the data, and there is more flexibility in designing your processes. In fact, what we'd like to achieve is that we come to a platform where we offer the data to the statistical user that you see on top there as a service. So we have enormous amount of data available on various locations, in various formats. And the only thing we want to provide is that a statistician could ask a question to the system and that he gets the answer in an easily accessible way and also understandable. Actually, you want to have the feeling of the data at your fingertips, like a data magician. In order to get there, we envisioned that we need to achieve something that we call a data abstraction layer, where all types of data sources are made accessible. Well, not really made accessible in a physical way, but I come to that later. This data abstraction layer and its function can be best described by some of its key capabilities. So there's the ability to discover, access and understand, which is very important because we have an awful lot of information, but if you do not understand the information and what it's about, you are lost. Of course, when we describe our data lake, there are many, many more capabilities that we need to achieve, and they are modeled in what we call our capability model, where all capabilities are grouped. And what we see here is that we distinguish 4 layers that have to do with data handling, data governance, source management, etc. In the layer at the bottom, we have the data source layer, where we have all the local data sets. Not physically, but it represents the fact that we have all these local data sets available. And these local data sets we want to make available for the consumer. Not directly, not by direct access to all these sources, but by making views for them. And in these views, we want to make it more understandable what's in the data and make it less complex for the users. And this is done, these views are made in the second layer, the data transformation layer. And the actually access to this information to the consumers is done in the data provisioning layer. Well, when working with data, of course, you also need things like security, data governance, and metadata management. And actually, these 3 are applicable on all 4 layers, and that's why they are in these horizontal plots here. All these capabilities are inputs for, or ingredients for what we want to achieve, the building blocks for our data lake. And the key building blocks that we are working on now, because we are doing experiments and developing these capabilities in order to come to a real minimal viable product of a functioning data lake, are shown here. Metadata model needs to be made and built. We use semantic technology for that, and data virtualization techniques. And I will focus on that virtualization technique later on. Because why data virtualization? And what reasons would there be to use this technique? Nowadays, we see that sometimes, for instance, sources are just too big to move. And I'm not talking about big data sources, but sometimes sources are so complex and so large that they are just too big to move and copy from one location to another. There might also be non-cooperative parties, owners of data sources who just don't want to share their data in a centralized environment. They stick to their data, but you want to have access to the data, so we have to solve that problem. Sometimes data are stored in a highly secured, safe environment, and it's just not possible to copy them outside that environment in a less safe environment. And sometimes just metadata might be missing or not described well. So how can data virtualization then be beneficial here? I'm not going to go too deep into the technique itself, but what the technique makes possible is that you can connect disparate data from any source, any location, any form it's stored, and just combine it in a virtual way. So there's no need to pick up and to copy the data to a physical location and then to combine everything. What you do is that you leave the data at the source and then start doing in this virtual layer, which is actually the transformation layer and the provisioning layer, to do all your data handling. So to define data transformations and combinations. Actually, the virtualization layer also harbors the intelligence that you put in your system. So we're going back to our user again, who wants so barely this access to the data and we want to make his or her life easier. So here's the consumer, and here are the sources. And there's this gap, and that is the gap that we need to bridge. And that's done by the data virtualization layer. Here you see there is no actually data in the transformation layer, but the views are made using the sources, and those views are provided to our consumers. Well, this sounds all nice, but does it work? And of course, we have to do a lot of experiments to also to sell actually the whole thing to our owners, because they're quite skeptical. It's fairly new. If you talk about virtualizations, like, oh, but where are the data? So we executed many proof of concepts, and there is one I would like to outline here, and it has to do with the family businesses. Well, as we know, family businesses are very important for healthy economies, and there's also a lot of interest in this group. Family businesses, self-employed, these are specific subgroups of our business registers that have high attention of policymakers, etc. So the first thing we needed to do is to distinguish the family businesses from the enterprises that are all in the business register. So we need to characterize the family businesses. Of course, you could send out a questionnaire and ask, are you a family business or not? But that's not what we do, because we need to decrease the burden, the administrative burden. So the task that we set ourselves was to try to characterize the enterprises in the business register, not by sampling or surveys, but by linking all the extra information that we have in the administrative registrations, just to characterize the family businesses. And we produced indicators with information that we already have to pinpoint the family businesses. And the indicators go about ownership, governance, profit, rewards, network. These are all indicators that are used to pinpoint family businesses. These are the sources that we used to make these indicators, and we had to distinguish between limited liabilities, partnerships, and sole proprietors. And here you see which source could be used for which specific target. And then all in all, of course, all these registers need to be combined, and we needed to downsize the population in the business register in the end, to delineate the family businesses, so that we have this population there. And I made a small animation. Let me see if that works. Because, well, what we did, we put all the sources in the data lake, in the technique, and we pushed the button. So here's the combination of all the data sources. Here are the indicators, who's a family business or not. And here we have presented, ta-da, the family businesses. Was it that easy? But that's, of course, how we would like to present it to our users. What happened in the background is that we made all these views, combined them, used the technique of the data virtualization, and then combined everything as if it was presented in a fully automated way. If I compare it to, because we had already our family businesses, but that was a long and elaborative way of really physically picking up all the sources, combining them, making physical combinations, save them again. This was all done automatically. So if we look at the benefits by using this kind of technique, then we can see a few things that are really applicable here. That is that the accessibility of data was increased, and that it didn't matter where the data were stored, different locations, we were able to use them and to leave them there. So this also increases the flexibility if you want to add new data sources. I showed the data sources we used, but if there is a better or more accurate or timeliness, more recent source, it's fairly easy to add this source or to replace one source. And probably you only need to remake 1 or 2 views, and all the rest of the algorithms can just stay in your system. So this comes to the third point. It really reduces your development time. Now we have these views for family businesses, but the idea behind it, or if you want to make another distinguish in family businesses, whether it's owned by certain groups, if you want to add more data to it, you can reuse what is already in the system. You do not need to do it again. And for statisticians, well, you can, it's easier to make new publications on phenomena, complex phenomena, that you want to publish about. Well, we're not there yet. This is what we have now in our minimal viable product. But of course, if we want to make real the data sources real accessible, we need to do a lot of work on the data governance part, also the security part. This system also makes it possible to combine data outside, so the security is a real issue, confidentiality control, and the metadata enrichment.
Brilliant.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
How fast?
Yeah, okay, you did well. Right, so any questions, please? We've got time for a couple. Come on, Ron, Old.
Yeah, thank you very much, Irina, for another very good presentation. Yeah, for me, I make this comparison to what Stats Canada was presenting early on and what you're now presenting on the data lake, and try to see where are the differences and I would see this as follows. Like the way you talk about views is something that's more on the fly, right? When you calculate things, and in the more linked register based, I think they're trying to make this more continuous existing or something, the linkages. So I just want to have your views on that. I mean, we have the same thing in our trade statistics. We're trying to at least keep one trade database fully controlled, and then we link it with all kinds of other sources, which we might get some additional insights, but we're not trying to get those other sources into the trade database. And I think that's a little bit where the difference lies. There is this quality aspect of it. It's like, is this kind of data lake approach more prone to error in your analysis? What kind of what quality control can you have, and so forth? Thank you.
Okay, well, to start with your first question, the views are actually materialized in the provisioning layer, but there is no data in the layer. But for you as a consumer, it's actually under the hood, so you wouldn't see it. If you question the system, you would get your information as if it was physically stored somewhere. And I think the main difference is that we choose to keep the data as pure as possible and not to combine too much in advance. For instance, we could put all the indicators in the business register, but now we have this satellite addition, so you keep your business register fairly clean, and all the enrichment and all the other things that you do, you put in satellites. And these satellites, we have them physically, but in future we would like to have them in the data lake with the flexibility. Also, for instance, if you want to have companies that are more sustainable in their, to put like sustainable or not sustainable behind them, we would like to have that, but not really in the business register. So I think the look and feel is as if it's materialized, but in the end, it's not. The second question, it's a good one, but I think it has to do with all the governance. I mean, we are fairly new here, and of course you have all these users. This, for sure, you need some coordination, and it's also not that everybody can just start making views in these layers, and we also need to organize the governance structure. Also, who has access to which data? It seems as if I say, okay, everybody has access to everything, but that's also not true. You want to make it easier, but that needs all to be regulated. I think what will help is that we do not copy all the sources. So we do have like a single point of trust, and that must reduce your faults, because what now happens is that everybody takes a source, combines it, puts it somewhere, and you have like 5 or 6 versions of a combined or a single data source, and nobody knows what's the truth. And I think that's at least one of the things we want to reach that helps.
Thank you. I'm going to have to cut it short there. If you've got anybody else wants to ask Irene or anything, you can do it at the coffee break. Thank you. Okay, so now we go on to Enrica, who's going to tell us about the Eurostat work on the interoperability framework. So this is looking at the relationship between countries registers now, rather than within your own country. And Enrica assures me she knows how to use the technology, so she won't be long doing the transfer. Brilliant.
Okay. So good morning. I work at Eurostat in Unit G1, that is Coordination and Infrastructure Development for the Directorate Global Business Statistics. And G1 is also responsible for this project called the European System of Interoperable Business Register. So today I will speak about this interoperability framework, which will give you some input of what happens when countries put together their statistical business register to produce one single output which could be beneficial for all of them. The interoperability framework is a document of 50 pages, so what you have received in your folder is just a short summary of it. It was initially prepared by a consortium of European countries, and then it's now under revision and updating by a task force of 11 member states, plus Switzerland also, very active. We have Fabio in the task force, which brings chocolate every time, so it's very nice to have him. This interoperability framework is, of course, then distributed to the countries, and they are consulted. And now we are in the phase of taking into account all their comments and provide a new version. So the focus today will be about what is interoperability and why it's beneficial for this project of putting together different statistical business registers to derive, using one common tool, a common output that can be used by different users and with the purpose of improving the quality of of the statistics that they produce. So what is interoperability? In short, it means that different organizations can electronically exchange meaningful information in ways that are understood by all the parties in the same way. This is very in short, but in reality, in order to achieve this, many conditions have to be set up in terms of legal agreements between the countries that put together their data, in terms of organization, how do they perform the data exchanges, in terms of semantic, which is mainly strictly here, when we say plant or when we say enterprise, do we mean the same statistical object or not? And of course, it's about technology. For the Commission, interoperability is considered a key factor to remove barriers to achieve a digital single market in the European Union and to allow different public administration to reduce costs, increase transparency and efficiency, and last but not least, increase the output quality of what they produce for the citizens. So what is this European system of business register in short? I'm sure that you have already seen many presentations on the EGR in the past edition of the WiesbadenGroup. So the ESBRS is made up of the statistical national business register of the European countries and a central business register that is called the Eurogroup register and is managed at Eurostat. They exchange every year microdata using secure networks on legal unit, relationship of control between these legal units, cross-border relationship, enterprise and statistical data on the enterprise, and this data exchange allows the creation of complete structure of multinational groups. So the process provides an output. So the process is such that the data are physically integrated at micro level. And of course, what is very much needed is that these organizations are interoperable between themselves. And we will see what do we mean. So the reason why this data exchange is done, I think it's now very, very clear because many years this work, this group has discussed the globalization issues and how to solve the challenges ahead. So each country has only a truncated view on a multinational group. So it's relevant for them to put together the information and to have them consolidated into the EGR. And then this consolidated picture is distributed back to all the European countries for their statistics. So in this process, what is the risk of not being interoperable? What is the risk of not being interoperable when you build up an integrated system of registers, especially when you speak about different countries? We have seen the complexity that in each of your statistical business register is contained. So when you put together all these systems, of course, the result can be not the best if some conditions are not applied. So, for instance, the most important conditions are the input data are standardized, the metadata are clearly defined and accompany the data exchanges. To the best extent possible, all the data exchanges should be automated, so the manual intervention should be really limited or put to zero. The processes that provide input to the EGR should be aligned in the various countries so that the information arrives to the EGR with the same calendar, with the same timestamp, with the same kind of inherent information. So the problem is that when this does not happen, the users do not recognize the output and they don't put trust on this output. So they finally don't use it. At the moment, we don't have any obligation for users, for instance, for fat statisticians operating in the various countries in Europe, to use this consolidated output. So it's just a matter of trust and a matter of recognition from their side that this common output is really producing some benefit for them and provide them better quality than the quality they can have just working nationally. What do they need, for example? The FATS users are the first one being targeted by this project. They need one very crucial attribute in their statistics, which is called the ultimate controlling institutional unit and the country where this unit is located. This is the main breakdown attribute when they produce their statistics. This information has to be accurate, at least for the very largest groups in Europe. It has to be used consistently between the two view of the FAT statistics that are the inward FAT statistics and the outward FAT statistics. And this information has to be used by all European countries because then from each national statistics, the European aggregate are created, and of course this has to be done in a consistent way. So the purpose of interoperability is that when you put together resources, you have to achieve a common public good. In this case, it's the global frame produced by the EGR, and this has to be of a good quality in order to be shared and reused. So the assumption is that better interoperability can produce a better output because everybody understands what is exchanged and what is in this output. And this can create better trust, more users using the product, and then more consistency in the final statistics. So the interoperability framework, according to the Commission policy, can be organized taking into account 4 main layers. The first layer is the legal interoperability, so you need a legal frame in order to exchange these microdata in a consistent way and in a secure way which protect the confidentiality aspect. You need to have an organizational interoperability, meaning a process and an agreement on the process, on the data flows that are exchanged, on the calendar. You need to have a semantic interoperability. You need to speak the same language when you exchange data. The metadata, the definitions has to be clearly understood in the system. And you need to have a technical interoperability, meaning you need to have the infrastructure to carry out this data exchange in a safe and reliable way. So in the project started in 2013 and it's going to finish in 2020. So we are, let's say, in the final phase of the project. Many things have been achieved already. Here you see just a short summary of how we go from the current situation, from the initial situation, let's say the as-is state, to the future end situation when the project will be finished. So for instance, in terms of legal interoperability, which, as I said, is about regulations, decisions, all kind of agreement that can be binding for the countries once they have signed. At the moment, we have a very good council regulation in Europe, which allows already a lot in terms of data exchange between the countries and Eurostat. And in the future, we will have another regulation which will be almost the same, plus there will be a reinforced role for the common identification of all the incorporated legal units in Europe. So there will be this full implementation of a unique number for all the incorporated legal units in Europe. And this is a very key, important point to allow interoperability, of course. In terms of organization, which, as I said, means about project coordination, workflows, exact roles, we have at the moment limited coordination, which is based on the good willing of the countries to work together and to cooperate together. There is no binding obligation for them to do so at the moment. But what is needed for the future is to really achieve and agree in some more binding way on a common governance, on the common calendars, and on the common quality requirement to exchange the data. So the process that is run in the EGR, just a few words about that. Maybe most of you know it very well. There are very key aspects on it. One is about the linking aspect. So you can imagine merging and integrating together sources from so many different countries. The importance of having this unique identifier when you do this linking. And then another very important part of the process is during the phase of the validation of the data. And here I would like to mention that this profiling activity exists also in a coordinated manner at European level. So together with national profiling activity that many countries run already, there is also this European profiling activity which has to do with a collaborative process where countries exchange their data, delineate their statistical unit looking one to each other, and using a common tool, a shared tool where all the users can enter and according to a certain process act, each one knowing exactly what is his role. So the process starts with the role of the country that has the top of the group resident in its country, and does first delineation of the group and then pass the information to the various countries where the affiliates are located, and they validate the information, they delineate their national enterprise, taking into account also the top-down view, etc. So it's a big achievement and a big improvement with respect to the past situation. So this is what is already in place to a large extent. So various countries putting together their national registers on the groups, and the EGR creating the consolidated view. What this project has to put is the star on the quality, and with this increased interoperability touching all the 4 layers, we have the objective that the final outcome, the global frame, will be really trusted and used by the statisticians in all the member states. So where we are at the moment, layer by layer, we think that the legal aspect is covered, the semantical aspect and the technical aspect are secured. There are pilots running with the countries where they test the various solutions that have been proposed in the project. In terms of semantic, in terms of technology, etc. The most challenging area is the organizational area. And here we listened yesterday to the lessons from Iran about chain management, because in this project, as you may have understood, there are all the elements to try to put in practice this chain management. But of course, the size is challenging, because we have minimum 27 countries and possibly more. And in each country, we have different stakeholders, different users that are interested to participate in this big complex chain. So maybe it's not a chain, it's a kind of I don't know, rounded chain. It's a node of chains, and this has to be designed and has to be proposed in the simplest way, at least in the beginning. And possibly linking the big chain across countries with the small chains that probably already exist in each country. Many countries have already put in place mechanisms to collaborate with the users and to have a dialogue with them, and to put consistency in their data. So to finish, the next step from our side as coordinator of this project in Eurostat is to have an agreement at the governance level on the interoperability framework that has been proposed, and on an implementation plan for the time after the project, and also to start preparing guidelines for the practical implementation in the countries.
Thank you very much, Enrica. We have time for 1 or 2 quick questions, please. Again, at the back. Has to be quick, mind, please.
Okay, thank you. I just wondering how to keep the confidentiality, and at once they interchange their microdata. Thank you.
So the confidentiality is secure in 2 ways. First of all, during the data exchange, the physical data exchange and the integration of the data, everything is performed in a secure environment that the Commission has put in place. And secondly, I didn't say here, but during the dissemination of the data of the Eurogroup register, only some users are allowed to see the data. The regulation defines clearly what are the limits and who are the users that can access the data, and in which way, which country can see what, etc. So it's not open to not even to all the statistical users.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Gigi.
Are you exchanging microdata
Yes,
and you are storing the data in your servers?
in Eurostat, in the central database, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to thank Enrica for an interesting presentation. And now we welcome our last speaker in this session, which is Barry from the Republic of Ireland, who is going to talk about the plans and progress that they're making in Ireland to try and join registers together and to create this sort of more integrated system. Thank you, Barry. Give him a chance to play with the tech. I might go and not assist him. One of the reasons we're running 10 minutes behind is every speaker can't sort the tech out. It would be helpful, Swiss organisers, if we could have some assistance.
There we go.
Brilliant, he sorted it himself. Thank you.
So, good morning, everyone. I sense the need for caffeine, so I'll keep it as quick as I can. My name is Patrick Keller from the CSO Ireland, not Barry from the CSO Ireland. I'll just give a quick... You call me Barry. Don't worry, Andrew, don't worry. I'll just give a quick overview of recent developments we're having in the Business Register in Ireland. We're basically at a phase where we're trying to implement the IT element of it in terms of actually building the IT application. We've done user specification, etc. So I'll just give a quick background on what we've done and where we plan to go. So the first step here is just a quick overview of what we have in Ireland in terms of our own business register. We're actually kind of lucky in Ireland in that we have good access to administrative data to our revenue commissioners. So on a quarterly basis, we get quarterly registration activity files on VAT, corporation tax, income tax, and prem employment. Now, the prem employment is just a register of employers throughout the country. We also get annual returns in again on corporation tax, income tax, VAT, and the P35 employment. Where the P35 employment comes in is that it links our social security numbers for individuals, which we call PPSN numbers, to the prem numbers we get in the registration files. So we can link on a regular basis who's working where and whether they move enterprises, etc. Now, we have access to the raw P35 data files in that we get each individual's social security number. But we have an ADC department, which is Administrative Data Centre, who actually strip the social security numbers before they get to the business register. So what we get is actually a CSO PPSN, which is just a made-up identifier, but we can still link individuals back to the prem number, etc. All these files we get from revenue are linked to through one revenue customer number. So the revenue customer number is simply a 9-digit or 10-digit code, which in turn links to corporation tax, income tax, VAT. So if one enterprise has a revenue customer number and they have a VAT number, they have a corporation tax number, they have prem numbers, they're all linked under the one number. So it's a pretty easy system to get going on our business register. We also have access to our company's registration office. We have limited companies that have to register through the CRO. So again, we get files back from the CRO on a quarterly or annual basis, which we can in turn link back to our revenue data because they provide a CRO corporation tax link file as well, so we can link them back to revenue numbers. We also get information on shareholder information. For example, we can identify immediate parents or child relationships through the CRO files that we get in. The survey return updates are also implemented onto the business register via enterprise updates. Now, the enterprise updates might sound like a system, but basically it's an email address. So enterprises get an update from a survey area, from the survey returns. They email business register, who then in turn are supposed to update NACE codes, legal forms, etc. Now, if this system is working good and proper, we would regularly get the updates, but again, it's down to the survey area whether they have time to actually feed the updates back to Business Register. And even when Business Register get the updates, they have to email every other survey that's linked to that enterprise and ask, are you okay with this update? So instead of an update taking 2 minutes after we get an email, it might take 2 days by the time we get returns back. So it's a pretty cumbersome process. We also have a large cases unit who regularly feed information back to the Business Register. A lot of large cases unit basically profile 50 to 60 of the top multinationals in Ireland. So a lot of the pharmaceutical companies, etc., would be profiled by large cases unit. They provide, again, information back to us on NACE codes, group structures, etc. But a lot of the time, the structures that large cases units deal with are actually something like a reporting unit, where it might be a mix of an enterprise, legal units, local units across multiple enterprise groups, etc. So the problem we have then is that we have to structure the information we get fed back from them into the business register or through the frames, etc., that we produce. So basically, these are data sources we use. We have good access, but we do have issues as well. The current state of play: we have multiple registers in existence in the office with no linkages. The business register has been in existence since the 1990s. Again, I think someone mentioned that they had purchased their system from New Zealand. We did the exact same in the 1990s. But we also have a data management system in operation in the CSO. Basically, this data management system was developed about 10 years ago, where each individual survey area maintains their own register in this DMS system. Now, this DMS system has no link whatsoever back to the business register. So again, all the updates, etc., that they experience from their end has to go through enterprise updates, which is no linkage back to the business register, etc. So on the last count, we had 96 multiple registers in existence in this DMS system. Now, that might seem a lot. It is a lot. But some of the registers that are in existence in the DMS are actually yearly cuts for some survey areas. So, for example, ASI have 10 registers in the DMS system. Basically, each year they take a cut of enterprises from the sampling frame provided by Business Register, and they upload a brand new register onto the DMS. And again, this creates issues in that there's no feedback loops from year to year, and they might be starting a lot of their cleanups on their own register from scratch every single year. Outside of the DMS and the business register itself, we have a balance of payments registers, which are done by national accounts, and we also have trade registers. And again, each of those registers operates in existence on their own, and they have no feedback to the business register. In addition to that, we have location factor between the BOP register and the trade register, in that they're located in Dublin, business register and business statistics are located in Cork, which is 2.5 to 3 hour drive. That's just a representation of the non-communication that's going on at the moment. Basically, as I mentioned, we have multiple registers in existence, and within one register we have multiple registers again within that, which cause further issues. There's no communication between any of them, and you could even extend this diagram to areas like census, social statistics, or the agricultural register, again, who have no links back to the business register. So, recent developments: there's been a big push for a business register IT application. This was basically brought around because there's been a demand for a respondent portal from our users and from the organisation as a whole. But when it was looked into developing a respondent portal, the issue we have is that a lot of the registers that aren't talking to each other are looking at enterprises in a different way. So, to develop a respondent portal where enterprises can use one enterprise number, we need to sort out the situation for registers. We need everyone working off the same basis, looking at the same local units, enterprises, etc. To begin this work, we conducted a coherency project from before 2015. This basically involved STS and SPS surveys, getting together and using, I think it was Lean Six Sigma project management, basically assessing all the processes that they do, and developing coherent processes throughout the organisation. The issues that we found through this process was that although a lot of us were using the same administrative files, for example, corporation tax, we might be using a different variable for things like turnover. So although we say we're using the same data sets and we're using them in the same way, it kind of ended up that we weren't, and there were slight differences then in the coherency and in the data that we were producing. But that has been solved. We have basically a coherent set of statistics now between STS, SPS and Business Register. There's also been a merger of STS and SPS divisions. We've had sharing of staff to deal with peaks and troughs. This is basically to eliminate the silo process that we had in previous years, where Business Register was on their own, STS was on their own, SPS was on their own, and no one was aware of what each person was doing. So now everyone works together, they work on multiple surveys. And basically the coherency project and this divisional merger has formed the basis of the push for the BizReg IT development. So some guiding principles post the coherency project. We've tried to develop a more corporate approach, more commonality, standardization, etc. Our data as a corporate asset to be further used, which adds more value, captured once, used often, strong management of the data life cycle, and this simply feeds into a single authoritative source, drive for coherency. We have coherency among business statistics, but now we're setting up coherency boards between national accounts, trade, and other areas that involve the business register. Also, we want to deliver enterprise-wide benefits, not just